So I told you that Ruth Payne had talked to the police during her interview, and she had stated, some different things that happened that evening. She talked about returning home that evening of the 21st of November and being surprised that Lee Harvey Oswald was there on a Thursday, and Marina was kind of embarrassed that he had arrived without permission. She stated that she went to the garage looking for some paint to decorate some wooden blocks for her children, and she noticed that the light was left on, assumed Lee had left the light on, didn't get an opportunity to ask him because he was already in bed. She said that he was unusually quiet that night at dinner and went to bed earlier than usual. And she also stated that he left a majority of his money, $170, which I figured out would be about $1,500 in today's currency, which was a lot of money. He left his wedding ring in the cup on the dresser and a note from Marina to get some new shoes for his oldest daughter, Junie. She also mentioned that she was not up when Lee Harvey Oswald left for work at the depository. Well, I was thinking to myself today, now did Ruth tell the police that when they came out and talked to him and talked about the gun? Or did Ruth tell them that testimony when they were brought into police headquarters, which we're going to talk about, at that point? Or when did she do it? So I called her this morning and talked to her on the phone. She, I feel bad for her. She has a companion, a guy that she's not married to, but she's been with for a long, long time, and she's, in her late 80s. And he's been doing, in May I called her, and she was very down in the dumps because they only gave him 15 days to live because he had cancer. Well, I sent her a Christmas card, almost afraid to ask whether the guy was still alive. So I called her today and talked to her for quite a while, and she said he's still in hospice care alive, and actually not doing great, but surviving 8 months longer than he really should have. So she was kind of upbeat today, but knows it's coming sooner or later. But anyway, I asked her, I said, now Ruth, I've been teaching this a while, but I never was real clear on when you gave this information to the police. Was it when they came out to your house and looked for the gun? Was it when you went into police headquarters? When was it? She said, actually, it was days later, after Oswald had been assassinated, that they got that testimony from her. So if you think about that, they didn't really know this information I told you until after Oswald was shot, which was kind of new news for me. But it was nice talking to her, and she said depending on how things would go with John, her companion, she would love to talk with us on the speakerphone, but it all depends on how things are going with her. So anyway, I wanted to give you that bit of information. Okay, now our next subtopic would be the Oswald family back at Dallas Police Headquarters. Now, on November 22nd of 1963, Lee Harvey Oswald was marched out for the second lineup. We only talked about the first one, right? And who was the one that was identifying in that particular lineup? Helen Markham. Well, what they did is they brought eyewitnesses from Oak Cliff, and they showed you on the movie that several people were looking out their windows and different things, and they brought those eyewitnesses to the lineup, and again, put Oswald in that lineup, and those eyewitnesses identified him as the killer of Officer Tippit without any question. Okay? So at 7:10 p.m., we're still on November 22nd, 1963, they officially charged Oswald with the murder of police officer J.D. Tippit. That was at 7:20. Well, 5 minutes later, Marina Oswald arrives at police headquarters. And if you remember, his office was on the 3rd floor. And what else was on the 3rd floor, just en masse? The media, okay? And he didn't want to march Marina through all this media that was on the 3rd floor covering this whole thing. And so what he did is he made the decision to have the rifle brought to Marina for possible identification, because he's trying to figure out if this rifle he has is the one that she saw go into the blanket that was no longer there. Well, the rifle was brought down from the 3rd floor, and I'll show you this picture here. Here's kind of a picture. J.C. Day, this fellow right here, held the rifle up, and he walked it from, to the 3rd floor down to another room where Marina was located so that the media could see the rifle. They had not seen the weapon to that point. So they did that purposely. J.C. Day was the guy that, remember, carved his initials on the stock when they found it on the 6th floor. The rifle was brought down. Like I said, J.C. Day displayed it for the media, and it was taken to the room where Marina was and shown to her, and Fritz asked her, is this the rifle that was in the blanket? Well, you got to remember, this gal is from Russia. She doesn't speak English very well. She's no weapons expert. And so she really can't say for sure whether that rifle is the one Lee had in the blanket. And there's kind of a reason for that, because Lee was very secretive, and he didn't like her in his business, so he didn't tell her much. So I'm not sure he probably showed her the rifle, but not enough to probably have her understand if it was the same one. If you took 6 rifles out of my gun case and showed my wife and asked which one I took out to the rifle range the day before, even if I showed it to her, she couldn't tell you. She's not a gun person, you know what I mean? So I understand that. Well, when Captain Fritz showed her the gun, she couldn't do anything for him, and the police left the room. Oswald's mother, Marguerite Oswald, suddenly appeared, and she was living in nearby Fort Worth. She shows up at, to see what Maureen is up to, because what's the story with her son? He's been charged with the murder of J.D. Tippit and is a suspect in the assassination of President Kennedy. Now this is kind of an interesting story, because I showed you a video on Bob Schieffer. That was the older guy that was talking about the media and fake news and how Facebook shouldn't be your, basis for finding out the truth, and talked about journalists and the papers that had gone out of business. Well, he was just kind of a cub reporter for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram at that time. And so Marguerite Oswald's back at her home in Fort Worth, and she hears about the assassination, and she hears that her son's name's associated with it, and she calls the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Bob Schieffer, this famous journalist now that was just kind of a cub reporter at the newspaper at the time, answers the phone. And Marguerite Oswald asked if someone from the newspaper would drive her to Dallas Police Headquarters. She didn't say why. Schieffer says, well, lady, we're not running a taxi service here, and besides, the president's been shot. And she says, yeah, I heard that on the radio. Matter of fact, my son's the one that they arrested for it. This is what she tells Bob Schieffer. Well, what do you think he does? He's a reporter. He can't get his car keys and her address fast enough. He quickly jots down her address. He gets a hold of another reporter, a guy by the name of Bill Foster, and they go pick up Mrs. Oswald, and they eagerly take her to Dallas Police Headquarters, because this is a big story, right? And they're newspaper people. Well, she shows up, the mother, and later Lee Harvey Oswald's older brother, Robert Oswald, shows up. And I got to tell you, Robert Oswald was the nicest man, from then until the day he died, which was just recently. Well, Marguerite's a little off the cuff. She's really kind of crazy, to be honest with you, the mother. And she brings Robert aside and says, hey, be careful what you say. I'm sure this room is bugged. And she also tells Robert, Lee's working for the CIA, and whatever he's done here is because the CIA told him to do it. I mean, she's really, really off the cuff here. Well, Robert Oswald has known his mother. He's grown up with her his whole life, and he is noticeably annoyed with his mother and pretty much just discounts what she says. But the point is, the Oswald family's there. Well, we go to the third lineup of Lee Harvey Oswald. This is kind of an interesting story, and that happened at 7:40 p.m. And unlike the first two of these first two lineups, what are the witnesses trying to identify? Oswald as what? Killer of Tippit. This is going to be the first lineup where they have an eyewitness to the assassination. Does anybody remember that guy's name that we talked about before? He was standing below the 6th floor. It's not Howard Brennan. He was the guy that was standing and said he saw the guy make the third shot. So they got this guy now, and they're trying to identify Oswald with this guy. Anyway, Howard Brennan gets in the lineup, he looks at the people, and he states to police he's not sure which man is Oswald because he's afraid. What's he afraid of?
Oswald?
He doesn't know if Oswald's the only shooter, he doesn't know if this is a conspiracy, and he's afraid for the lives of his family if he, points out Oswald in this lineup. So Captain Fritz is really disappointed because he thinks he's got a chance here now to finally tie Oswald to what? They've never tied him to the gun, ever. That's the whole problem, okay? So we have another subtopic. Captain Fritz continues his question of Oswald. And at 7:55, Oswald's back in Fritz's office for more interrogation, and Captain Fritz asks Oswald if he kept a rifle in Mrs. Payne's garage. And his response was, no, I don't own a rifle. Oswald was then told that his wife stated that indeed he did keep a rifle wrapped in a blanket in the Payne garage. And his response was, that's not true. Captain Fritz then finally says, and he kind of gets a little frustrated, he says, Lee, you know you killed the president, and this is a very serious charge. And he simply responds by saying, no, I haven't killed the president. Well, when told by Fritz that the president was dead, Oswald's response was, they'll forget about him and have a new president in a few days. It was absolutely amazing how this guy was in dreamland. I mean, how this guy was so far off from what the normal person would be like if you were accused of killing the president. Well, Captain Fritz, at this point in the investigation, decides he's going to bring in who? Buell Wesley Frazier, the 19-year-old kid, basically, that had been giving Oswald a ride to work and was the one that gave him a ride to work that day. So he brings in 19-year-old Buell Wesley Frazier. How many of you guys in here are 19? Anybody 19 yet? Anybody close to 19 within a month or two? Okay, so you've been brought in. You've been given this guy that shot the President of the United States in for questioning. Put yourself in this position. Now, during this interview, Buell Frazier told Captain Fritz the following bits of information. Some of this is repetitive. He said to Captain Fritz, he gave a ride on Friday morning, November 22nd, to Lee Harvey Oswald. He was running late. Lee Harvey Oswald walked to the Randall residence and knocked on his door about 7:10 a.m. He also told Fritz that prior to knocking on his door, Oswald had placed a package in the back of his car, according to his sister. Buell answered the door, and he headed to his car, and he said the following, and when I came out to get into the car, I glanced over and saw a package in the back seat. I said, what's that? And he said, you remember, that's the curtain rods I was going to bring in. According to Frazier, now remember, Lenny Mae Randall said how big was this package when asked, you remember? 2 feet. Okay, when they asked Buell Frazier the length of the package, he said it fit between Oswald's armpit and his cupped hand. So probably about 2 feet, probably matched, fairly similar, the description that his sister gave. Well, this is where it got interesting. Now, this is according to Buell, and Buell's a good friend of mine, and he'll tell you this when we talk to him. This is what he said. He said Captain Fritz then handed him a document and asked him to sign it. And if you know Buell, Buell's really tentative to detail. And so Buell doesn't just sign it, he reads it. And when he's reading this document, he discovers it's a confession to being part of the Kennedy assassination. Fritz is trying to get him to sign that he was part of this assassination by giving Oswald a ride to work, and he knew all about it. He was an accessory. Well, Frazier refuses to sign the document, and he tells Captain Fritz he would never do anything like that, meaning shoot the president or be involved, and that the document was ridiculous. Now, according to Buell Frazier, Captain Fritz took a swing at it, and Frazier blocked the attempt with his arm, and he went on to tell Captain Fritz that if he tried that again, he would find himself, quote, in a hell of a fight. Now, I'm going to tell you a little prelude to a different story. You haven't heard of this guy yet, but Jim Lavelle was the guy that was handcuffed to Oswald when Oswald was shot, which we're going to talk about in a bit. Now, Jim Lavelle's a very good friend of mine as well. And Jim Lavelle and Buell Frazier are acquaintances. I wouldn't say they were buddies, you know what I mean? And Jim Lavelle doesn't call Buell a liar or say that doesn't happen, but Jim Lavelle told me on several occasions that knowing the demeanor of Captain Fritz, he would have never taken a punch at Buell Frazier. That's just what he says. So, you know, I've been around Buell for a long time, and in my mind, Buell is certainly not someone that would elaborate a story or lie. And Jim Lavelle is a man of honor, and he's not anybody that would do either way. But that was his opinion of Fritz, that he would never take a punch at Buell. Buell swears on oath that he did, and that event happened. So we'll have to see how that comes out at a later time. Now, the next subtopic then is going to be the charging of Lee Harvey Oswald with President Kennedy's murder. I told you before that it was the goal of Captain Fritz and the Dallas Police to charge him by the end of the day on the 22nd. They thought that was really important. Well, at 10:15 p.m., and we're still talking about November 22nd, Fritz still has little or no evidence against Oswald for the shooting of President Kennedy. He has no evidence tying him to the rifle that was found on the 6th floor of the depository. He has no proof that the rifle belonged to Oswald. And he has no credible witness because Howard Brennan kind of choked, so to speak, to put Oswald on the 6th floor of the depository at the time of the shooting. So he has nothing on him, really. Well, after his failed success with this continual interrogation of Lee Harvey Oswald, Captain Fritz at this point decides to take a gamble. And at 11:26 p.m., 34 minutes before the day ends, he officially charges Oswald with the murder of President John F. Kennedy. He's taking a gamble because he doesn't, I mean, if he goes to court on this tomorrow at 8 a.m., he's probably going to lose, right? But he charges him anywhere, hoping to get more evidence that'll tie him in. Now that takes us to the next day finally, which is November 23rd, 1963. And it was kind of interesting because we're talking about 12:10 a.m., which is just 10 minutes after the new day starts. And what happened is when Oswald was charged with the president's murder, no one told him that they had charged him, okay? Well, at 12:10 a.m., which is 10 minutes into the morning of November 23rd, Captain Fritz is talking with other officials within the police department because the press is just requesting the heck out of him to get pictures of Oswald, because they haven't been able to do that only as he's, you know, kind of been up and down the hallways. They want to get some pictures of him. The world wants to know about this guy that allegedly shot the President of the United States. So police officials and Captain Fritz decide that they're going to take Lee Harvey Oswald back to that lineup room. Not to line him up for anybody, but to have him stand on stage, so to speak, and let the press take pictures of him, because they're getting so much pressure. And they think if they do this, they'll do what? And they'll get out of where? The 3rd floor. They won't be, you know, driving him nuts on the 3rd floor, so they're going to give him an opportunity to get some pictures. Now, they meet with the press and they give them these ground rules that they can take pictures, but they can't ask Lee Harvey Oswald any questions. They don't want a debacle here. They just want him to take the pictures and be on their way. Well, the moment that Oswald was placed onto that platform that they used for the lineup, he begins talking to reporters. And what's their cue? What do they think that's their cue to? Oh, the rules have changed. We must be able to ask questions because he's talking to us. So Oswald starts, you know, talking to these reporters, and the reporters in the room take this as kind of a cue that, oh, we must be able to ask him questions. Well, the first question, what's the first question somebody asked him?
Did you kill the president?
Yeah, did you kill the president? First question they asked him. And his response was this. He said, no, very calmly. This is what he said. No, I have not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet. The first thing I heard about it was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question. Well, at that moment, and you can hear it if you watch these videos, a reporter said, you have been charged. Okay? That was the first thing. And Oswald seemed kind of startled by that, but he never lost his composure, and boy, they got him out of the room. As soon as he started asking questions, and that guy asked, you know, some reporter said, did you kill the president? He makes that comment, and then the other one pipes up and says, well, you have been charged. They got him out of there as quick as they could. Well, as he's walking out of the lineup room, another reporter asked him what happened to his eye, because obviously he had a bruise over his eye, and he simply said, a police officer hit me. And that was in reference to Officer Ray Hawkins, who punched Oswald when he tried to shoot Officer M.N. McDonald in the theater. So, at 12:30 a.m. on November 23rd, 1963, they take Oswald's mug shot for the first time, and you don't have to pull it out, but you do have a copy of this mug shot look like. Now, we got a connection between Oswald and the rifle. This is an interesting story. Well, by this time, early in the morning of the 23rd, Captain Fritz is desperate for a connection between Oswald and the rifle because he's charged him with the assassination, and he's got nothing. Well, later in the morning of November 23rd, Captain Fritz receives this unbelievable break in the case. And during their continual investigation from the time the president was shot at 12:30 on the 22nd to now, they found some evidence. They found an order form. And you have a copy of that. They found an order form for the purchase of a rifle. and it came out of this magazine right here, the American Rifleman. And I probably got to preface this by saying, in 1963, you could buy guns out of a catalog. It was not difficult to do. So I want you to quickly look in your handout and find this advertising page right here in your handout. And then I want you to find the rifle that Oswald used in the assassination and circle it. So find your handout that looks just like this that I gave you. And go through these particular rifles that you can buy. And I want you to circle the one that Oswald purchased. Or, I'm getting ahead of myself. Someone purchased out of this catalog. So go ahead, see if you can find that page I gave you. There you go. Find the rifle that you think, circle it or whatever, that you think Oswald bought on that page. Here's the ad. This is the original magazine, February 1963, American Rifleman. This is the magazine, not this one, but this is the magazine that Oswald, darn it, somebody ordered a rifle through. Now, you find it? Which one is it? Okay, how much did he pay for that rifle? Well, he bought it with the scope, so he paid. Can you believe that the rifle that killed the 35th President of the United States cost $19.95? Okay? That is the rifle he ordered. How do we know that? Because they found an order form at the bottom. You see that little order form in the bottom right-hand corner? This is what Oswald filled out. You have a copy of it. I gave it to you. Weird, though. Oswald didn't order it. Who did? A. Heidel ordered that rifle. My goodness. And where was it delivered? To A. Heidel's post office box in Dallas? So they checked that out, and guess